Very good.
Ooh. Right then, and I will now just hand over to Amy, who has been made co-host on this meeting, so she's in charge of everything now. If everybody can mute themselves and then use the raise a hand operation if they need to ask any questions. So if you go to just hover over the chat thing at the bottom, click on it, and there should be a, oh no, sorry, was it gestures, isn't it, somewhere? Where have they gone?
Also, if you want to just unmute and ask questions during the lecture, that's fine.
Yeah. So if you mute now and then unmute and ask questions, that's fine. All right, Amy, it's all yours.
Thank you. So I just got a introduction, but basically I'm going to talk about concussions, and I'm going to try to keep it as little from the medical standpoint and more towards the actual what do you do kind of a thing. But I really love this subject, so sometimes I get carried away, so then just steer me the right direction if it comes too technical. So what I'm actually, does everybody see this screen? Okay, good. So what I'm going to talk about is the definition of concussions and basically what it is. I'm also going to talk about the worst case scenario, which is a intracranial hemorrhage, which is what you don't want to happen, but the signs and symptoms of that. And then basically, like practically, what do you do when there's a head injury on the pitch? What are the signs of concussions that as a ref you can look for? Because it's not really completely your responsibility to find, but there are some for sure signs of a concussion, and then some that are like a little bit of a sign, maybe someone should not continue playing. And then I'm just going to quickly, why are concussions so important to find, and what do you do after the game? Does anybody feel like there's something specific that they're already now wondering about concussions, or anything that they want me to put into the lecture that they would like to know about?
No, that sounds like a good cover for me.
Good.
We're looking at recognizing and removing. We don't have HIAs in Sweden, so it's recognize it and remove them from the pitch and get them to the right medical care. Yes,
exactly. So basically, when there's a head injury, of course, concussion is what we talk about a lot within rugby. But actually, whenever I see a head injury on the pitch, I think about the neck, I think about concussion, and I think about an intracranial bleed. Because a head injury, it's not always a concussion. You can hurt your neck and you can get hurt worse than a concussion. And there's different things that you do with the different things. So just always remember to think about the neck if someone's lying down on the ground. It's not really your responsibility to do something about it, but anyone who's there should be able to stabilize the neck and just hold that person still if they are unconscious or on the ground. Basically, what a concussion is that the brain is in fluid inside of the skull, and when we shake our head fast, it can bounce against the walls and you can have like small hits on the brain, and that can cause a concussion. And what happens in a concussion is that when we get that hit, it changes the way the nerves take up different substances in their metabolism. So it changes the way that they work, it changes the way that they talk to each other, and it changes the blood flow in the brain. So after a concussion, you also have increased risk of getting an intracranial bleed, which is also why it's so important that a concussion actually gets off the pitch. And this change or this damage, it takes a while sometimes to actually show itself in symptoms. So it can take up to 24, 48 hours. So even if someone looks okay on the pitch, they can still have a concussion, but then that's not something that you as a ref in any way can know in advance. I can't know either because the symptoms can come later. The symptoms in themselves are different. What everybody thinks about is headaches and nausea, but it can also be just blurred vision, issues with balance, difficulty coordinating moves. You can get amnesia, so you completely forget what happened during the hit. You can have difficulty with your memory, difficulty concentrating, you can be disoriented, but it can also be really, really slight things like you become more sad or more irritable. I had one guy who just cried for 2 hours. He was completely fine, but he couldn't stop crying for 2 hours. And then he was fine again, but he was more sensitive for about 2 weeks, and then that disappeared. And another guy just started trying to hit everybody around him, and he just wouldn't stop. And that was also due to a head injury. And it can be something as slight as sleeping difficulties, which you can never see on the pitch. What you really, really want to look for, though, is an intracranial bleed, and that is the life-threatening thing. So basically, you hit your head so hard that a small blood vessel can pop, and you have a bleed in different parts of the brain, and that is life-threatening, and therefore it's the first thing that I always look for. So I always look for signs for this before I look for a sign of concussion. And the signs is quite easy to look for. Someone who vomits over 2 times, that person, of course, is not on the pitch anymore. Someone who has a loss of consciousness for over 1 minute. So if you are at a game and someone is knocked out and they're knocked out for over a minute, you should always call an ambulance. They should always go to the hospital. Someone who's weak on one side, so neurological signs, basically signs from the brain. So weak on one side, can't see, can't speak, can't hear. Those are signs. Liquid from the ear or nose, so not snot, but just clear liquid like water. They should always go to the hospital. Amnesia, very diffuse sign, but if they don't remember what happened, all players say, I don't know, it went so fast. But if they don't remember, like, what even happened to begin with, where they are, why they're there, or why you're asking the questions, or they don't remember anything for a few minutes before the hit, that is also a sign that they should go to the hospital. And a headache that just gets worse and worse. So if someone comes to me in the hospital, these are the things that I look for. And if I don't find these things, I won't do a CT scan, because then it probably won't be a brain bleed. But then if they are affected, then it might be a concussion. Just something that's good to know, when to call an ambulance and when to just let it go. So on the pitch, whenever I see someone go down or get any kind of injury to the head, what I first think about is neck protection. Does everybody know how to protect a neck? Yeah, so it's really easy. Basically, if this is the head, I come with my arms from this side and I just hold like this, but with my arms up. So just hold them stable.
I think everyone who's done the World Rugby Fair program.
Yeah, you should have.
Part of it.
Yeah. But
and
just,
every referee should have done that to get their level 1, or they should now anyway.
Yeah. And it looks like I might be doing fair in Sweden soon. So if you guys haven't, then you can maybe contact Neil Johnson, because he's going to do something about that.
I'll give you some info on that after this meeting, Amy, okay?
Yes, good. Anyway, so neck protection. Then there's, you look for the signs of intracranial hemorrhage that you can see straight away. So if they're passed out and they're passed out over a minute, always call an ambulance. Otherwise, you can take them off the pitch. If they're like just for 30, 40 seconds, you can take them off the pitch. And then I look for signs of concussion. And whenever you're not sure if it's a concussion, they should always get off the pitch. And players hate this, and I play too, and I never, ever, ever go off the pitch if I am not injured in a way where I can't move. I have a saying that if I can walk, I can play, and I think all players are like that, but they're not allowed to choose by themselves. And I always try to say to them, one game is one game compared to the rest of your life if you do continue playing. But they hate it. And how to do this practically, because there's easy fail-proof signs of a concussion. If you see this, it is a concussion. So if they're knocked out, if they've lost consciousness, it is a concussion. People say that it doesn't have to be, but it is. If you're knocked out, it's a concussion. It doesn't matter if it's 10 seconds, it's a concussion. If it's over a minute, they go to the hospital, but even just a few seconds knocked out, it's a concussion, and they should go off the pitch. Other easy fail-proof signs of concussion is confusion, but it also depends on the level. So I've been to a few games where I've been in the audience, and it's so difficult as a ref to have the time to look for this and look for confusion. But people who run the wrong way, for example, is a definite sign of a concussion. Lighter confusion, a lot more difficult, but someone who's running the wrong way or just like no idea what they're doing, it is a concussion and they should go off the pitch. If they're off balance, so someone who can't walk properly or like swaying around a lot, it's a concussion. Just, it is. Vomiting, always a concussion. Now, they can vomit because they're tired. So if they haven't had a hit to the head, then that's fine. But otherwise, if they have hit to the head and then 2-3 minutes later or 5 minutes or even 10 minutes later they vomit, it's a concussion. And then amnesia. So if they don't remember the hit. So it's quite common if someone gets a hit, they're lying down and I get called over. The first thing I check is what happened. And they always say, oh, I don't know, this guy came and I think his elbow, but I'm not sure. That's not amnesia because they remember something about what happened. But if they're like, I don't know what's going on, that is a concussion and they should get off the pitch. Not so easy, but still pretty sure signs of concussion. And that's, like I said, not easy for you guys to know. But if a guy has a headache, that is a sign of concussion and they should maybe get off the pitch. But that is also a little bit up to interpretation, because if you exert yourself a lot, you can get a headache from that. If you get a hit to the head and it just hurts where you got the hit, then that's not a concussion. But if you have a headache that comes after a hit to the head, it's better to be on the safe side. And that headache can come straight away, then you know it's a concussion, they can get off. But the problem is if it's like 15 minutes later and you see that they're like not really in the game, that's not really your place to evaluate, but that is a sign of concussion and they should go off. Now, usually you guys don't have the chance to think about that they got a hit 15 minutes ago and now they're acting strangely. But again, that is something to look for. Nausea, you can get nausea just from exerting yourself, but if it comes straight after a hit to the head or within a few minutes of getting a hit to the head, then they should go off. Blurred vision. I always ask my players, because I'm the doctor for a team now, so I always do a baseline concussion test. And a lot of the guys do get blurred vision just from exerting themselves or because they have difficulty generally with the eyesight. But if they have blurred vision, then they should go off if it comes after a hit to the head. And a lot of guys say they see stars. Seeing stars is not a sign of concussion, then that's fine. And then a failed concussion test. A failed concussion test doesn't actually say that you have a concussion, because the team that I'm doing now, Erikslund, I think we have 28 players and only one guy has passed the concussion test when he was not concussed, when I was doing a baseline test. So the concussion test is very, very difficult to start with. So a failed concussion test doesn't mean that there's a concussion, but if you know what their baseline is, then they should go off. Again, you guys don't have to do a concussion test, but still. So fail-proof signs, if you see these things, they should go off. Not so easy, but pretty sure signs. So if someone gets hit to the head, it's not really your job to evaluate how they're doing. But if they're like, oh, my head hurts so much, or oh God, I feel so nauseous, they should go off the pitch. And then
just going to ask, have any of you guys in this room had any of these yourselves from back in the days when you were players? Because I identify some of these myself.
I've lost count of the amount of concussions I had during my playing days.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just play on.
Yeah, you do.
Well, the thing is, I mean, I've been knocked out for maybe 3 or 4 seconds. Nobody.
Then you had a concussion.
I've had a concussion. I've carried on playing. Then I felt nauseous, nearly vomited, dizzy on the side of the pitch for the next 30 minutes. So all of these actually I can relate to them, and I think a lot of players will as well.
Mm.
Can you identify them?
Yeah, I can actually agree with that as well, because it is actually, I was introduced quite late to this thing on how to properly deal with head injuries. And it was actually Amy, when I was with the Junior Vikings, who actually first introduced me how to properly check and deal. And she actually gave me the verdict of that you show signs of serious injury and you should sort of take care of yourself. So yeah, I can relate to all of the points that has been mentioned so far.
Right. Sorry for interrupting, Amy.
Not a problem. But again, if these things feel like they're too loose in the frames of it, from in how you work practically, let me know, because I can break it down a little bit more too. But it's just, these are the things that I look for.
They're good. They're
as
things you can
just easy.
identify.
Good. Okay, great. So, and then we have the not at all sure signs that should still be a warning. So whenever I'm by the pitch, if someone is slow up from the ground, I mean, a lot of our players are overweight and overtired. They're slow up, but that's just a player that I continue to look at for a few minutes in the game, just to see that they're continuing to be fine. I know you guys don't have the time to do that during a game, but it's just a warning sign that could be good if you do have the time to check them out. Someone who keeps touching their head. I do that if I get a hit and it hurts right where I got the hit. You always do this and you always check, like, is there blood and whatever. But someone who's touching their head, that's someone who I want to take a closer look at. If I'm there and we're able to change players back and forth, or I will continue to checking how they play for at least a few minutes. Because like I said, the concussion signs don't usually come straight away. For some people they do, but it can be after a few minutes. They start acting strangely. Someone who keeps shaking their head a lot. So you see guys like this, and that's a sign that they do that because they're confused, and they don't really know what's going on, and they're trying to get their head back in the game, and that can be a sign that they're having issues after a hit to the head. And then someone who's clumsy, because like I said, coordinating movements is difficult for some people after concussion. So someone who keeps missing the ball or keeps like dropping the ball, that's also a sign that I need to check them out. And the problem is they can show these signs and you don't actually see that they had a hit to the head, because a lot of scrum situations, I mean, someone can come in and kind of kick them from behind and whatever. It's difficult to know. But these are just signs that it's someone that maybe someone should look at more closely.
I was going to say to the guys, if somebody drops the ball, don't use that as the one and only thing.
No, exactly.
All the time.
Exactly. And slow up the ground. I mean, like I said, most of the players can't get up from the ground just generally.
Probably a prop or a hooker getting slow up from the ground most of the time.
Yeah. And basically, you don't have to do HIA, but I'm just saying that there is an HIA protocol. So I do use the HIA, but I don't use it officially, because if you use it officially, you have to report it into World Rugby and whatever. But I find it easy, because what you do is you check, like I talked about, these symptoms, like the physical symptoms. You go through a list and you ask for those physical symptoms. Do you have a headache? Are you nauseous? Whatever. Then you can also check for the cognitive symptoms, like difficulty with memory. I ask them, I check their memory through the HIA, and also confusion or disorientation. I ask them, do you know where you are? What half is it? So on. This is also why the players fail. Because, like I said, I've done this for a long time, and I do concussion baselines before every season with every team I work with. And I've only had maybe 10 players who've actually been able to do the concussion test when they weren't concussed. But it's just a nice baseline to have. And so that the HIA is just to do you remove someone from play and check them further. And then you have the HI2, which is, do you have a concussion or not? And you do that straight away or within 24 hours of the hit. And then you have the HI3, where you evaluate the progress and how they're doing. And I can say that you can pass the concussion test with all the questions, but you can still fail it because you have symptoms, because not everybody has the same symptoms. Some only have cognitive symptoms, some only have physical symptoms, some only have one symptom. So Even if you pass the question part, you can still have the physical symptoms part. And even if you pass all of it, it can still be a concussion because you get symptoms 24 hours later. So it's not in any way fail-proof, but it's just a good tool to have for medical people. You guys don't have to do it. There are myths when it comes to concussion in rugby. One is that gum shields protects against concussions. They've done loads of studies on this. They don't. They're super important because they protect your teeth, they protect your jaw, and they actually also protect this bone in your face. But they do not protect against concussion. It's the same with scrum caps. A lot of people think that scrum caps protects against concussions, but they don't. They protect your ears, which is great, but not against concussions. There's like myths about he was only knocked out for a few seconds. Like I said before, a few seconds, it's concussion. And it's the same thing. They say he wasn't knocked out. Well, that doesn't matter. Only 10% of concussions, you have a loss of consciousness. So it can still be a concussion. There's also people saying you're not allowed to sleep, and that is completely false. You're supposed to sleep and you're supposed to rest. The only way for your brain to heal is for it to rest. So if someone gets a hit to the head, they are allowed to sleep. What you're looking for, where people say that you're not allowed to sleep, is the neurological signs that I was talking about, that you're not able to move something or whatever, like as a sign of a brain bleed. But then you can do that by just waking them up every 30 minutes, or just like pointing a little bit at them, they'll move something, and then you know that's fine. And then also Mythbusters, he passed his concussion test, so it's not a concussion. That's not true. So even if because I get very caught up in it too, so even if I as a doctor come over and say he passed his concussion test, he's fine, officially he's allowed to play again. But I have always informed the players of the risk that with a head injury you can get symptoms up to 24 hours later. So they always know that we can never guarantee, from none of our perspectives, that it isn't a concussion after you get a hit to the head. Yeah. Any questions so far? No? Okay.
Nope.
So
Pretty thorough.
the potential consequences then of a concussion, or why it's so important to find. When you have concussion, you have an increased risk of injury, and not just an injury to your brain. If you are clumsy, or if you're confused, or if you don't know what you're doing, within rugby, there is a significant risk of injury. So you might hurt your shoulder or your knee or something else. So that's why we're trying to find concussions, so you don't have other problems too. But also it increases the risk of a brain bleed, like I said. There's something called post-concussive syndrome, where you have symptoms for over 2 weeks or 1 month after the injury. So if you have symptoms that are still ongoing after 4 weeks of the injury, that's post-concussive syndrome. And the more hits that you get, or more concussions you get, the more of a risk you get of having post-concussive syndrome. There's second impact syndrome, which is lethal. And basically it's when you get a new hit to the head whilst it's still healing from a concussion, where there's a significant risk of a brain bleed and dying within 5 days of the second hit. And this has happened within school rugby in England a few times, so it's quite important to think about.
New Zealand also.
Yeah.
There was a couple of cases in New Zealand a couple of years ago.
And then there's the chronic, I've spelled that wrong, but the chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is what they talk about in the movie Concussion with Will Smith. And it's also what they're talking about now with the lawsuit and everything in England. And basically it's you get so many hits to the head and so many concussions, and you don't manage them properly, so the brain doesn't heal in between the concussions, that you get a injury to the head that's so bad that when you're around 40 or even younger, you get Parkinson-like symptoms. So you shake a lot, you wee yourself, you poo yourself, you have difficulty with your speech, you get really depressed. There's people who've committed suicide. and you get problems with like mood swings and memory. So this is really important to really think about the concussions in a bigger way. And like I said, every player hates to be sitting out from a game, but in the end, they'll be able to play longer and play more games if they're more careful during that game. And then also, a repeated concussion increases the risk of dementia and seizures and epilepsy. Yeah. Just quickly, rehabilitation, you guys don't need to know this, but you rest for 2 weeks if you're under 25. You rest for 1 week if you're over 25. You, during that time, avoid mental and physical exertion. You avoid, for the first 24 hours, TV, loud music, alcohol, drugs, computer games and stuff that's just too much for your brain. And then you have a recovery program when you take 24 to 48 hours on each step, and you increase slightly in your exertion at each step. And whenever you have symptoms, you go back 1 step. If you guys are interested, but again, this is not your job to find concussions, but I do have like a A4 paper that I have online that I whenever I find a concussion or someone who could be concussed or just generally a head injury, I always send it out to them I ask them for their name and I send it on Facebook Messenger, where all this is in there, and also the signs and symptoms they can look for the next 24 hours. So if they feel like, oh, this could actually be a concussion, they know what to do with their rehab.
I mean, this could be good for us if we do identify something that's a possible concussion, that we could point the players to after a game, because they're always going to come up and complain that, I can't believe you made me go off the field for a bang to the head. You know what it's like, with some of the guys, they never want to go off. They always want to stay on the field. It's for their welfare that we do it, so that they can carry on playing into their 50s and 60s in the old boys games where it actually gets fun again.
Yeah, and that's what I always try to say, like and
we can pass this information on to them.
Yeah, so if you want to, I can send it to you and you'll send it out. It's up to you guys, and it's 1.5 years old now, but it is updated in the medical information that it's
I think most of it's on the World Rugby website as well, the return to play program.
Yes, there is. But I've tried to dumb it down a little bit. I know it sounds awful, but just to make it really easy, even for like the 10-year-olds or whatever, to understand. I mean, the parents are the ones that take care of them, but still.
I mean, we could put this up on the referee website for players, and we can put a link to it.
If you want to. It's just a Word document. So in summary, basically, what I look for with a head injury and what I think that you guys should look for is just, if someone's down on the ground and they're not moving, remember the neck. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if someone has any signs of an intracranial bleed, so knocked out for over 1 minute, vomit over 2 times, headache that gets worse and worse, neurological signs, so they can't move somewhere, or they can't speak, or they can't hear, or they can't see, always send them to hospital, because they can do a proper evaluation there, and that could be a sign of serious injury. The next thing is that you have clear signs of a concussion. Whenever someone's knocked out, if they don't remember what happened, if they have a headache, they should go off the pitch. However, you have also slight signs of a concussion. Again, not your job to look for, but if you do have the time during a game, you see these signs, someone running the wrong way, or someone who seems a little bit off, someone touching their head a lot, wobbly when they're walking. These are signs that it's someone that you should look at more, and actually wobbly on their feet, they should just go off, or running the wrong way, they should go off. But like just a little bit off, if you have the time and if you're able to check them a little bit closer, because it might just be that they're like tired and annoyed because they got hit, but otherwise that they maybe should go off the pitch. If you're ever in doubt, just basically tell them to go off and just say, I can't be sure, but there were signs of a concussion, and if there were, you're not allowed to play. And they're going to be annoyed, and their coach is going to be super annoyed, and that's just how it's going to be, because you're trying to look out for their best. Yeah, any questions or any like examples where you're thinking about like, oh, I had this once when I was when I was a referee, and now I think that it might have been concussion, maybe not, or anything like that?
I've had to recognise and remove players before. We've had one where a player was hit in the head, was groggy, stumbling all over the place. We made him leave the pitch, told him he wasn't playing any more of that tournament. And then he asked if he could referee.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, mental and physical rest.
Yeah.
is the important thing. Yeah.
So to keep him out of the bar, to be honest, we let him do some of the girls' games.
Oh, no, you should not have done that. Sorry.
I know, big mistake, but
it happens. Yeah, but just that person, some people are very, very stubborn, but he or she should just have gone back to their hotel or whatever and just slept.
Yeah, but rugby guys on tour with an open bar, you know what they're like.
Yeah.
Anything? Mike's shaking his head going, don't know what you're talking about.
We're always on our best behaviour on rugby tours.
Well, we are, because we're gentlemen. But some people...
I've seen too many concussions in my playing days and as my refs as well. So, and back in New Zealand in the Waikato, just before I left, they introduced a blue card. We all did HIA training, and the blue card was you showed the player who you thought had a head injury if he was showing certain symptoms, and he was to leave the field and get checked by, this is Premier League though, so this is one step below national level. Yeah. And if they passed, they could come back on. But it had to be a doctor who assessed them to let them back on again. So I did all the training, but I never actually we moved here to Europe before I actually got given the blue card. So I never used the blue card.
We don't have match day doctors at most games here.
No.
We don't even have an ambulance for most games here. We have a mobile phone and the nearest hospital within 10 minutes usually.
Yeah, well, we had a concussion on the sevens, the lady sevens, a couple of weeks ago in the game I was doing. She got tackled and her head bounced off the ground, and the play carried on. And by the time I turned to see, they already run on to check her, and they took her off. And yeah, she went for a trip to the hospital. She wasn't knocked out, but she was nauseous and couldn't remember a damn thing. So yeah, so I didn't have to do anything on that one.
And that's important. That's important that you're saying too, because like I said, amnesia is a sign of a brain bleed. Now I've had one game. I think Rami, you were the ref for that game. I think it was Exiles against someone, and Seb was there as a physio. And physios aren't actually allowed to say anything about concussions, but I was there too, so I just jumped up and helped. And that guy kept asking the same question for 1.5 hours before he was okay again. And if you have a doctor there and you're able to evaluate and whatever about that, not knowing and repeating stuff, then that's fine, because a concussion can be really big in the beginning and then it gets lower. But if there's something at all that feels like, oh, this is not good, just send them to the hospital.
Any more questions, guys?
No, pretty good.
I'll just say thank you very much, Amy, for coming along and doing this for the guys.
Hopefully it's the same things that you've heard 100 times, but just again.
But a few extra things to look for. It was a little simpler the things to look for on the pitch, and a little bit more. If you see these, then definitely come off. If you see these, keep an eye on them, and if you see these, then you maybe think about it. Yeah. So thanks a lot.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I'm just going to log off, and I'm guessing you're going to have like a little bit of a
I'm going to
meeting.
stop the recording. I got some info for you as well.
Oh, okay.
Where's the recording? There it is.